When you first sit down and look at a massive stack of science notes, and I mean an absolute mountain of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. It is a lot to take in.
Right. I mean, it spans biology, chemistry, physics, earth science, even the philosophy of how we learn this stuff.
It's basically the definition of information overload.
Exactly. It feels a lot like walking into a teenager's bedroom.
Yeah.
It's chaotic, it's overwhelming, and, you're pretty sure there's a mold experiment happening somewhere in the corner.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate way to describe it.
You just look at this immense pile of human knowledge and think, how does any of this actually fit together?
Well, we have this natural human tendency to want to neatly categorize things. We want the facts about quantum particles in one file folder and the facts about tectonic plates in another.
Right, keep it all separated.
Exactly. But nature doesn't organize itself into separate departments. It is all one continuous, deeply interactive system.
And that is our mission for you today.
Okay.
We're not going to let you drown in a sea of seemingly random trivia.
No, definitely not.
Instead, we're taking this massive array of sources and stitching all of these disparate facts together into one grand, unified narrative. We are going to build reality from the ground up, starting with the invisible, unpredictable quirks of quantum mechanics and zooming all the way out to the massive, sweeping orbits of our solar system. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it. So to build reality, you have to start at the absolute microscopic foundation.
Right.
Before we can even begin to understand massive macro-level systems like the weather or gravity or how an ecosystem survives.
We have to look at the invisible building blocks of matter.
Exactly.
And our understanding of those atomic building blocks completely shifted over the last century. And it's a wild story. It didn't happen overnight.
No, it took a lot of trial and error.
Right. Max Planck kicks things off by studying blackbody radiation, and he realizes something strange. Energy doesn't flow in a smooth, continuous wave. It comes in discrete little chunks or packets.
Which was a huge deal at the time.
Oh, yeah. And then Einstein takes that idea and applies it to light with the photoelectric effect, proving that light isn't just a wave, it's actually a stream of individual particles called photons.
Right. And this completely upended classical physics.
Completely.
Because suddenly the microscopic world didn't behave anything like the macroscopic world we can see and touch. From there, the models of the atom just grew increasingly bizarre.
Yeah, didn't Niels Bohr initially propose a very clean, understandable model?
He did, yeah. Bohr thought electrons orbit the nucleus in very specific fixed circular paths. You can picture it almost like tiny planets orbiting a tiny sun.
Which is how a lot of us learned it in school, right?
Exactly. But then Louis de Broglie and Erwin Schrödinger realized that matter itself moves in waves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so electrons aren't little planets moving in clean, predictable circles. They actually exist in these fuzzy, smeared-out clouds of probability, which we call orbitals.
That fuzziness is what brings us to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, right?
Yes, exactly.
Heisenberg basically proved that it is physically impossible to know both the exact position and the exact momentum of an electron at the same time. Like, the closer you look at where an electron is, the less you know about where it's going.
Right.
It implies that at the rock-bottom foundation of reality, things are not certain at all. It is fundamental chaos.
Yeah, at that quantum scale, you are entirely dealing with probabilities, not certainties.
But see, this is where I start to struggle a little bit. Let's think about the periodic table of elements. I always think of it as a meticulously organized cosmic kitchen pantry.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Scientists like Mendeleev figured out that all these elements are the fundamental ingredients that combine to bake up literally everything in the universe. And from those ingredients, we get the incredible structure of biology.
We do.
We get the central dogma of molecular biology. DNA replicates itself, transcribes its code into RNA, and translates that RNA into functional proteins. That's an incredibly precise set of instructions.
It's amazing, really.
And we get pioneers of cell theory like Robert Hooke, who looked at a piece of cork under a microscope and coined the term cell, because the structures looked like the sparse rooms monks lived in.
Right, the little monk cells.
Yeah. Or Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who first observed actual living microscopic organisms.
And that biological structure scales up so beautifully. You start with simpler prokaryotic cells, which completely lack a membrane-bound nucleus.
Yeah, they're the basic ones.
Exactly. And eventually you get to eukaryotic cells, which have a distinct, highly organized nucleus and complex organelles.
Exactly my point. So here's my pushback. If quantum mechanics says we can't even pinpoint an electron's exact position because of the uncertainty principle, how can biology be so incredibly organized?
That is the big question.
I mean, how does the universe build something as complex as a replicating DNA strand or a eukaryotic cell out of those same unpredictable, chaotic atoms?
Well, this raises an important question. How do you get order out of fundamental chaos? And the answer lies in the sheer scale of the numbers and the specific mechanisms of chemical bonds.
Okay.
You're right that an individual electron in its orbital cloud is completely unpredictable. But when you get billions of atoms interacting, those chaotic probabilities basically average out into rock-solid certainties.
Oh, I see.
The transition from quantum fuzziness to biological structure happens because atoms desperately want to share or swap those fuzzy electrons to become stable.
So they lock together.
Exactly. They lock together to form molecules. And for biology, the most crucial locking mechanism is the hydrogen bond.
Right, the hydrogen bonds.
Think about the DNA double helix. A single hydrogen bond is basically a weak magnetic attraction between molecules. Individually, it's flimsy.
Sure.
But when you have millions of hydrogen bonds holding the two strands of a DNA molecule together, it becomes incredibly stable.
That makes sense.
It's the perfect architectural choice because the bonds are strong enough in massive numbers to keep your genetic code intact, but just weak enough that the cell can act like a zipper.
A zipper.
Yeah, it unzips the DNA straight down the middle when it needs to replicate or transcribe that code into RNA.
Oh, wow. And if there's a slight error in how that zipper goes back together, that's where mutations happen, right?
Yes, precisely.
The sources mentioned, deletions where a piece of the code is lost, substitutions where one letter is swapped for another, insertions where extra code is just jammed in, and translocations where whole chunks move around.
Right, all those little errors.
And those tiny chemical mistakes are literally what drive evolution over millions of years.
Yes. The unpredictable atoms lock together via bonds to form the highly predictable, organized machinery of cells. And occasional tiny errors in that machinery are what drive the sheer diversity of life.
So the chaos organizes itself to build the cosmic pantry.
Exactly.
But simply having the ingredients sitting on the counter isn't enough. You need to know how to cook. The cells are stable, but they have to actually do something, They have to move, react, and live.
They can't just sit there.
Right. And that requires an entirely different set of rules that force these atoms and cells to interact.
Yeah.
The laws of physics and thermodynamics.
Now that we have the pieces on the board, we need the rules of the game. And the fundamental rules of motion start with Isaac Newton.
Let's talk about Newton's laws of motion because they govern everything. First, we have inertia. Simply put, objects are lazy. A boulder sitting in a field wants to keep sitting there. And a hockey puck sliding on ice wants to keep sliding it.
Unless some outside force kicks them.
Exactly. Then there's acceleration, famously. Force equals mass times acceleration. This is just the intuitive reality that pushing a massive boulder requires significantly more effort than pushing a tiny pebble to get it up to the same speed.
Right.
And finally, action and reaction. You can't touch something without it touching you back with equal force.
And governing all of that physical movement is energy. We experience this every single day. There is kinetic energy, which is the literal energy of motion.
Like move.
Yeah. Think of a baseball flying through the air. You can feel the energy it carries if you try to catch it barehanded.
Definitely.
Then there is potential energy, which is stored energy waiting to be unleashed. A heavy boulder teetering at the very edge of a cliff has massive gravitational potential energy. A stretched rubber band has elastic potential energy.
Or even the chemical potential energy stored in a sandwich, just waiting for your cells to break it down.
Exactly.
But let's get into the laws of thermodynamics, because this is where the universe's rules get strictly enforced.
Oh, yeah. Nature does not mess around with these.
The first law states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes forms. You can turn chemical potential energy into kinetic energy, but you can't magic new energy into existence.
Right.
Then you have the second law. In any spontaneous process, entropy is always increasing.
Entropy, yes.
I always picture entropy as that teenager's bedroom again. It naturally, inevitably gets messier and more disordered over time. The only way to reverse that disorder is to actively expend energy to clean it up.
Yeah.
The universe is constantly drifting toward a state of higher disorder.
It is an unavoidable physical reality.
But wait, I have a question about this.
Sure.
If the first law of thermodynamics explicitly says energy is never destroyed, why do ecologists always talk about energy being lost as it moves through a food chain? If I eat that sandwich, ecologists say a bunch of that energy is lost. Where does it go if it literally cannot be destroyed?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is precisely where the first and second laws of thermodynamics intersect.
Okay.
When scientists say energy is lost in biology, they don't mean it vanishes from the universe.
Hmm.
Because of the second law entropy, every single time energy changes form, the process is incredibly inefficient.
Oh, I see.
When a deer eats grass, turning chemical energy into the kinetic energy of running, a massive portion of that energy is degraded into unusable heat.
Because you get hot when you exercise.
Exactly. You radiate heat when you run. That heat dissipates into the environment. The energy still exists, satisfying the first law, but it is now too chaotic, too disordered to be harnessed to do biological work.
So it's not destroyed, it's just downgraded into useless heat.
You got it.
That strict obedience to physics actually reminds me of another rule from our sources, Henry's law. This states that the solubility of a gas in a liquid is directly proportional to its pressure.
This is a wild one.
The notes outline the mechanics of deep-sea divers getting the bends, or decompression sickness, and it is a terrifying example of biology being held hostage by physics.
It is a brilliant, if visceral, demonstration of Henry's law. So let's break down the mechanism.
Okay.
When a scuba diver descends deep underwater, the physical weight of the ocean above them creates immense pressure.
Right.
Because that ambient pressure is so high, the nitrogen gas from the air tank they are breathing is literally forced to dissolve into the liquid of their bloodstream.
Wait, really?
Yeah. They swim around with a huge amount of hidden gas trapped inside their blood.
So if they swim up to the surface and the pressure drops,
Yeah.
where does the gas go? That doesn't just vanish, does it?
Exactly the opposite. According to Henry's law, without that crushing deep water pressure holding it in, the liquid blood can no longer contain that dissolved gas.
Oh, no.
The nitrogen violently comes out of the solution and forms literal physical bubbles inside the diver's blood vessels.
Wow.
Imagine twisting the cap off a shaken bottle of soda. The sudden drop in pressure causes all the carbon dioxide to immediately fizz up into bubbles. That exact same fizzing happens inside the diver's veins.
That is horrific.
It is. Those bubbles block blood flow to joints, the brain, and the heart, causing agonizing pain or even death.
That is horrifying.
Yeah.
But it perfectly illustrates that living things don't get a free pass. The physical rules dictate exactly how life can survive.
Absolutely.
Which forces us to look at the web of life, how entire ecosystems manage to capture energy and float around, fighting against these strict thermodynamic laws.
Life is a relentless, ongoing battle against entropy. To keep that metaphorical teenager's bedroom clean and organized, living organisms have to constantly consume fresh energy. Right. But because of the inefficiency we just discussed, the whole system is governed by the 10% rule of ecological efficiency.
So at the very bottom of the food chain, you have producers, the autotrophs. These are plant and algae pulling off the miracle of photosynthesis, harnessing raw solar energy.
Right.
But when a primary consumer, a heterotroph like a caterpillar, eats that plant, the caterpillar only gets to keep about 10% of the plant's energy to build its own body.
Because the other 90% was either already used by the plant simply to stay alive, or it was lost to the universe as that degraded, unusable heat.
And when a small bird eats the caterpillar, it only gets 10% of the caterpillar's energy. And a hawk eating the bird only gets 10% of that.
Exactly.
The mechanism is so wildly inefficient. That is why you can look out a window and see millions of blades of grass, thousands of bugs, a dozen birds, but maybe only one hawk in the sky. There physically isn't enough energy remaining at the top of the pyramid to support any more predators.
It creates a razor-thin margin for survival. And there are two other principles that highlight how precarious this is.
Okay.
Liebig's law of minimum states that an organism's growth isn't dictated by the total abundance of resources, but by the least available crucial nutrient.
Oh, that makes sense.
You could have a plant sitting in perfect sunlight with unlimited water, but if the soil is missing a microscopic trace amount of magnesium, the plant simply stops growing. The chain halts.
And Schulford's law of tolerance points out that organisms only exist within a very specific, definable range of conditions.
Right.
Too little of something, like water or heat, is deadly. But too much can be just as lethal. Life has to carve out a living in this nary sweet spot in the middle.
Because energy is so scarce and conditions are so strict, animals are forced into crazy compromises just to scrape by. They engage in symbiotic relationships.
Like what?
Sometimes it's mutualism, a true give and take, where both species trade survival services to overcome those energy deficits. Other times it's parasitism, where one organism steals the hard-won energy of another, directly harming the host to save itself the thermodynamic cost of surviving alone.
So what does this all mean? To me, it highlights the utter fragility of the entire system. Consider this thought experiment from the sources.
Let's hear it.
Imagine a simplified ecosystem containing just lettuce, caterpillars, small birds, and lions. A gardener decides he wants flawless lettuce, so he sprays a heavy pesticide and wipes out the caterpillar population. What happens?
Everything falls apart.
The entire thermodynamic chain collapses. The birds starve because their energy transfer is gone. The lions subsequently starve. Wiping out one tiny piece proves how deeply intertwined the living biotic world is with the non-living abiotic world.
And humans are currently acting as that gardener on a global scale. We are profoundly altering the abiotic factors that life relies on.
Yeah, we really are.
The greenhouse effect occurs when excess carbon dioxide traps infrared radiation from the sun, artificially heating that narrow range of tolerance we talked about.
Right.
We create acid rain, where industrial air pollution mixes with water vapor and falls back down, literally destroying the vegetation at the very base of our food webs.
Which means we need to zoom out even further. These fragile biological food webs don't just float in a vacuum, they need a container. They are housed within the massive physical structures of our planet, the spheres of the Earth.
Our planetary home is structured into interacting layers. You have the lithosphere, encompassing the solid, rocky crust and upper mantle.
The ground.
Yeah. The hydrosphere, which is all the water. And the biosphere, the physical zone where all this biological life actually happens. But none of that could exist without the protective shield of the atmosphere.
The atmosphere is fascinating because it's not just a static bubble of air, it's highly stratified. I like to picture the layers of the atmosphere like a series of heavily armed bouncers at an exclusive club, protecting the biosphere from a very chaotic universe.
That is a very fun way to picture it.
Out at the very edge, you have the exosphere and the thermosphere, taking the initial brunt of space. Below that is the mesosphere, which is the physical bouncer.
Yep.
This is where actual space rocks and meteors burn up due to friction before they can crush us.
Then you have the stratosphere, which acts as the invisible bouncer. It contains the ozone layer, which actively filters out lethal ultraviolet radiation from the sun.
Right.
By the time you get past all those defenses, you reach the troposphere at the bottom. This is the VIP lounge where we live, where the air is thick and where all of our weather happens.
It is an incredible defense system. And when we look past those atmospheric bouncers out into space, it's amazing how our understanding of our place in the cosmos has evolved.
It really is.
Historically, we had the Ptolemaic theory, which stubbornly insisted the Earth was the stationary center of everything.
Which made sense to them at the time, but
Right. But eventually, Copernicus overthrew that with the Copernican theory, correctly placing the sun at the center.
Yeah.
And today, we understand the nebular theory, realizing that our entire solar system formed from a massive, rotating cloud of gas and dust.
And the ongoing orbital mechanics of all that leftover spinning dust and rock gives us celestial phenomena like eclipses.
Oh, eclipses are so cool.
They are. Because gravity locked the Earth and Moon into specific paths, we get a solar eclipse during the day during a new moon, when the moon passes perfectly between the sun and the Earth, casting its shadow on us.
Right.
Conversely, a lunar eclipse happens at night during a full moon, when the Earth passes between the sun and the moon, casting our shadow onto the lunar surface.
Okay, here's where I want to push back one last time.
Go for it.
Given everything we've just discussed, how perfectly tuned the Earth has to be to sustain life, with the exact right troposphere for weather, the stratosphere for ozone, the exact right placement in the solar system to not freeze or boil. Isn't it wild that humans are constantly looking outward?
What do you mean?
Well, there's a scenario in the sources where a student suggests we should be mining meteorites for undiscovered elements.
Yeah.
Are we taking our perfect fragile Earth for granted by obsessing over deep space?
What's fascinating here is that studying space actually accomplishes the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We don't look outward to ignore the Earth, we look outward to understand it. When we study the extreme hostile environments of the cosmos, whether it's the barren dead rock of a meteorite or the runaway hellish greenhouse effect on Venus, it provides a stark contrast.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
It shows us exactly why our precise abiotic factors like atmospheric pressure and trace minerals are such miraculous statistical anomaly. Studying the dead universe teaches us how the living biosphere works.
Wow. That really brings the entire journey full circle. Think about the ground we've covered today. We started at the absolute microscopic bottom, looking at the fuzzy, unpredictable quantum mechanics of atoms.
We did.
We saw how those chaotic particles seek stability, locking together with massive numbers of chemical bonds to build the highly structured zipping and unzipping machinery of DNA and living cells.
We then mapped out the invisible rules those cells must obey to move and function, Newton's laws of inertia and force, and the unforgiving laws of thermodynamics that demand a constant toll of energy.
We followed that energy as it flowed, highly inefficiently, through the fragile biological food webs, constrained by strict limits of nutrients and temperature.
Yeah.
And finally, we zoomed all the way out to look at the massive atmospheric bouncers protecting our planet and Earth's orbital dance within the solar system.
It is a profound realization that the identical physical rules governing a scuba diver getting decompression sickness in the ocean are intimately connected to the thermodynamic limits dictating a lion's food chain on the savanna.
And the orbital mechanics of a solar eclipse in space.
Exactly.
And that is why this matters to you, the listener. This deep dive isn't just a review of facts. Understanding these mechanisms gives you a literal operating manual for reality. It changes how you look at the mundane world.
It really does.
When you look at a simple glass of water, you aren't just seeing a drink. You're seeing billions of hydrogen bonds stabilizing quantum chaos.
Right.
When you see a caterpillar eating a leaf in the sun, you are watching a localized, desperate rebellion against the second law of thermodynamics.
You finally have the context to see the underlying architecture of nature. It is an incredibly elegant, deeply interconnected system.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Think back to that first law of thermodynamics, the law of conservation of energy. Energy is never created, and it is never destroyed. That means every single action you take, every bite of food you eat to fuel your cells, and every electrical impulse firing in your brain right now as you listen to this deep dive, wait, strike that, as you listen to this deep dive, is just the universe rearranging as eternal ancient energy.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to put it.
You aren't just a person sitting in a room observing the universe from the outside. You are a literal piece of the universe experiencing itself. So, knowing all of the intricate, fragile rules that had to perfectly align just for you to exist, the question is, where will you direct your energy next?